out to stuff here, which is fine.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have our main cameras rolling here? Do we have our SD cams rolling? Both of them? Matt, leave your hands off the board, Matthew. Thank you. Okay, folks, for those of you that are just watching, if you're just now tuning in, you're tapping into a little bit of the behind the scenes. I'm Mr. Ettaro here with my friends from the Reitz Theater, and we are here with a live workshop. I'll let our friends tell you what it is that they're going to be doing today. They're going to be presenting for about a half an hour on various aspects of theater production and techniques, and they'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then we're going to have a little bit of fun with the students here in the Digital Media Technology program, a little question and answer, and maybe some live activities. Then we'll be repeating this process again around noon for the afternoon shop. So you're watching Digital Edge TV on Jeff Tech Television. I'm Mr. E, and I'm going to go ahead and step out for now. And we'll give it like 5 seconds when I get off the stage and get the ball rolling, okay?
All right.
All right, thanks, guys. Yep. And you ready? Okay, let's hold it down. 2, 3, 4, and...
Hi, I'm Dave Clark. I am from the Reitz Theater and various other projects. I'm here today with some Reitz Theater players, a group that we're collectively calling ourselves BARDS, which stands for Backstage Acting, Rehearsing, Directing, and Script Writing. And we're going to cover some of those subjects. We can only touch a little bit on each of these subjects, and some of them apply directly to live theater only, and some of them apply both to live theater and to filmmaking and other video processes and projects and things like that. I will start to, first out, let me introduce some of the people here. To my left is Brian Schaefer. He basically knows everything there is to know about live theater, but he's going to be concentrating pretty much on the technical and backstage aspects. He's a well-versed director, set constructor, and everything like that, and he's going to be concentrating on those particular subjects. Also to my left is Beecher Klingon-Smith, who's going to be talking about rehearsing, doing it correctly, about prompting a little bit, and about memorization of lines. And what's particularly notable about that is Beecher himself admits that he's not real good at memorizing lines, but he has to use technique to memorize lines. So if he can do it, anyone can. To my right is Melanie Frank, and she'll be talking about accents and comedic timing a little bit, and some other bits and pieces of acting. And to her right is Annette Crooks, one of our favorites at the Reitz Theater. Her acting skills are superior to just about anyone's, and she's going to be talking about the subtleties and coming through with emotions and character and things like that. But we'll get to that when we get to that. A little bit about myself. I've been involved in Reitz Theater for about 9 years now. And recently I've been involved in a lot of film projects, so I'm kind of crossing over between the two worlds, and it's interesting, contrast and compare. But I'm going to be talking about script writing, which kind of applies to both. So I'll go ahead and get into that right now. Script writing, first in my opinion, the way I go about doing it anyway, it starts with an inspiration. That inspiration can come from a dream, songs, life experiences, and sometimes it just comes out of nowhere, which is usually known as the muse. But one thing I recommend right offhand is to keep a notebook handy, because sometimes I know myself when I wake up in the morning is usually when I have my best ideas. And I preach this more than I practice it, but it's good to be able to have something to write down the notes right away, because you can always come back to that and develop it. So try to keep something like that handy when you have an idea for a story or a poem or whatever you're into writing, but we're talking specifically about script writing. Then from there, start taking notes. Take notes on the scenes. Maybe you think of a really good line. You can build an entire story around a really good scene or line. Moments in it, shots. Some people first they think, wow, wouldn't this be incredible to have a shot of swooping in from here and doing this, and you can actually build a story from these little aspects of even a play. You can think about how it's staged out, or in film, just a really nice shot can be the beginning of building a story. Action sequences. Sometimes you can start with an action sequence. And that applies to plays as well. That's more towards film. But the important part of what I'm saying here is that you don't need the entire story in your head to start writing. You can start with a simple little scene and go from there. So many people are hung up on writing because I don't know where this is going to go. I'm not sure what to do here. Don't worry about that. Start, and then you'll be able to add to it later. And that comes to my next point is think of the story points in any given script, whether it be for a play or a film or television, as connecting the dots. The first thing you're going to be doing is you have an idea of, okay, I want this to happen here, I want this to happen. I'm not sure when this is going to happen, but this will happen at some point in it. And you can always go back and connect the dots through the story. A story does not have to be written in a linear fashion. I know a lot of people try to write a script and they say, well, I've gone this far and I got stuck. Well, then go to some other part of the story. Write another scene. And you can always come back and do that later. That holds up a lot of scripts from being written because of that. And that's a mistake I think a lot of people make is they think they have to go, from beginning to end. You can start at the end and go backwards. There's no right or wrong way of doing that. And like I said, don't let the lack of a full storyline prevent you from initializing writing something. When it comes to crafting a concept, planning a concept and flushing out a concept is much easier if you start with the inspiration and go from there rather than force yourself to push ahead with a story. A good example of which, anytime in school, for example, if you said, okay, I want you to write about this, it can be hard to do. And the reason is because you're forcing it. You're pressing a story that isn't there. So go from the inspiration and add to the inspiration. After you have that down, you have your idea for a story down, you have maybe a couple scenes in it that you're thinking about, I'd like to have this in there, this scene in there, or I want this line here, or I want this character to be like this. That's when you start adding the elements and the overall concept of the story flow to the initial idea. Think about the key moments of the story. Have a point. How many times have you heard somebody watch a movie and they go, okay, that was entertaining, but I don't really know what the point of the movie was? Well, don't be that person. Have a point to what you're doing. You can have a moral of the story. You don't have to, but have at least a point or a moral or both. And think about the conclusion. Some great films and plays have been ruined by not so good endings. So you can think about a conclusion or it's opening for a continuation, if it's a series or potentially a series. A lot of times you can conclude the project, but you have the door open for a possible spin-off or a continuation of the series. Bring your audience along. Keep them interested. You can have slow moments, but keep the slow moments interesting. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't overdo it on the action or the fast moments because they become, like Michael Bay. Or there's directors out there that use too much action and too many explosions and things like that. And on stage, you can have too much going on too fast, and that can lose the interest of your audience very quickly as well. Think about layers, and this is really important. One of the biggest mistakes I see in both playwriting and short film writing is that it looks like, for example, a short film looks like it's a short film that somebody just made and wrote, and they filmed this independent project at home because you don't have background things happening. You don't have foreground things happening. You don't have things that may even, little scenes that can set up the story. They don't have them. It just goes right into, oh, we're here at this office and this is happening, or we're here at this museum, and set it up a little bit. Add layers to it. you can have side stories that go off a little bit off your main story, but don't lose focus of the main story. It's a little bit of a balancing act with that. That comes with experience through writing, really. Keep the flow of the story going, keep it progressive. This comes along with keeping interest of the audience. But make sure at all times, even if it's something that's going off subject a little bit, you're keeping them engaged and like, where's this going to go? And keep the flow to your end point, your conclusion of the story. Make sure you use, but don't overuse, things like elaborate details. Sometimes you can get hung up. It's nice to have a nice, detailed scene, but if you overdo it, then you're getting into off-subject, boring, etc. Subtlety. Some of the best scenes in films and plays are little, quiet, subtle scenes. And that's great, but again, don't overdo that. The same with action sequences. Don't overdo those as well. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is great, particularly in more, mysteries and dramas, not as much in comedy. But if you overdo it, you become cliche and run-of-the-mill. Profanity. Okay, now this is a subject that can vary, depends on the subject matter of the play or the film. If you're doing something like The Sopranos, you're going to have a lot of profanity in it. And I'm not, in life, I will swear, at times. It's not like I have anything against it. But here's what I see too much of with people writing scripts, particularly after high school, college age, is overuse of certain words, thinking that they're making it bigger or more impactful. Well, you don't need to do that. If you overuse it, first of all, it takes away the impact. Now, if you have something like The Sopranos, for example, where they talk that way, that's how they talk. But there are so many times I'll see in a script overuse of certain, I'm not going to get into them, but certain words that if you took that out or changed it, it'd be just as effective, but also open to a larger audience. You're narrowing your audience with it. So don't think that proves a point. Neil Simon, for example, a very famous playwright, he will use F-bombs in his plays, but they are there for a reason almost every single time. They're not accidental. They're not. If you take them out, it actually changes the play quite a bit. So if they're there for a reason, that's fine. But when somebody hands me a script to give an opinion on, and right away I see that, I'm thinking, okay, this is a sign of weakness in your writing, to be honest, because you have to rely on it too much. Don't overuse peaks and valleys in your. You want more of an even flow, and then if you overuse big surprise scenes or bursts of action, then each time you do that, it becomes less of an impact. So it's much more impressive when you don't use it as much, just in frequency. Finalizing in details. I talked about connecting the dots. Remember that term, connect the dots, when you're story writing, because you have your points in it. There's things you want. There's scenes you want. And when you get into finalizing, you'll go back through and you'll get from one point to the other. Where's this taking you? This is taking you from here to there. Remember that. Bring forth the details. When you go back and you're finalizing the script, this is when you can add some detail to the scene or the play. Don't concentrate on minor points to the extent of losing focus of the overall story. It's great to have these details and let's talk about layers. But if you overdo it, you're going to lose focus of the key points of your story. You don't want people getting distracted by it too much. Just remember your audience at all times, and that comes back to that a lot. The biggest difference between a good script and a great script is the dialogue. A lot of people have trouble with dialogue. I don't know if there's a real easy way to approach dialogue, except I'd use the word natural. Make it so that something sounds like the person would be. Put yourself in the character's position, and make it sure it's something they would actually say in that case. Dialogue, I guess, takes practice for a lot of people, but it is the most important thing, really, even film, TV, or on stage. Keep things when it comes to dialogue, keep it realistic for the situation as well, not just for the character, but for the situation. Keep both things in mind. Dialogue has a natural flow. That's sometimes interrupted by what happens in the story. Something drastically changes what's going on, but that's okay. But in general, it has a natural flow. Try, and everybody tries to do this, but it's nice if you can have some memorable lines within dialogue of your project. That alone can help it stand out. Be original. Don't read something and come back and say, okay, I'm going to do a version of this, unless you're doing an actual parody of it. And when you're being original, be inventive. Nobody wants to see anything rehashed, unless you're doing a complete remake. That's not what we're talking about. Be sparse with the cliches. B-movie is filled with cliches, and so is a play that basically doesn't get done because it's not chosen because it's so filled with cliches. And when it comes to memorable lines, think about memorable moments as well. Just scenes. Anytime I've ever directed a play that I've either written or not written, I always think about a couple scenes in it. They're the ones that stick with you, and that makes it all worth it. Even if you just get one really good scene in it, that's what you keep the memory of. Okay, real quick, I'd like to go over character development. Sometimes stories are built around a character you have in mind, and that's fine. Make sure when you get into the character development, and you're always thinking about from the point of view of the audience, you establish the character's role. Hero, villain, old sage, a red shirt from Star Trek, whatever, this person is there for a reason. And make sure you establish that, even in simplistic forms, early on, and then you can develop it from there. Remember yin-yang or shades of gray, and not 50 Shades of Gray, but what I'm talking about is a character. I challenge anyone to find somebody in the past 2013 years that is all good or all evil. Everybody has, every character should have a little bit of good in them or a little bit of bad in them. Keep the traits, their character traits, realistic, including their background, their reactions realistic within character. Just think of when you're writing it, eventually an actor has to stay in character, but the writer needs to stay in character. If the writer doesn't stay in character, then the actor you can't stay in character because you're following the script. So it's up to you first as a writer. Flush it out and expand it according to importance. Prioritize the characters in some extent. Keep that in mind. Minor characters are minor, but they're there for a reason. But as far as flushing out, knowing stuff about a character, you want to do that more with the more important characters of the story, the ones that are going to be there longer. Use details to strengthen your storyline. Without some details, as you're connecting the dots and building the story, it falls very flat. You can put those in later to strengthen the storyline and to make it an overall better story. Memorable characters. Make sure your characters are relatable in some, no matter how bad they are or how good they are, make sure they're relatable and have traits, at least traits in them that are relatable to the audience. That's something a lot of people overlook as well. Sometimes when you put a story together, you get a Boba Fett. And what I mean by that is a character that was maybe meant to be a minor character at first, that became a fan favorite. And it became bigger than the story itself in some incidences. You just got to remember that you can make these cool characters and some will catch on and some won't. And great lines can make the really memorable roles. You can have a pretty so-so role character, and they come up with some great lines in it that you wrote. That can make it stick. And finally, this goes to the story and the character. If you want, you may not want to, you may want to conclude it, but you can do things to the character or to the storyline that leaves open the possibility of prequels, sequels, and complete side stories. If a character in the story becomes a fan favorite, so to speak, or an audience favorite, then you can say, okay, well now this person, we don't know for sure this person died or whatever. That leaves that open. I guess that's about it. I kind of jammed a lot in there. Anyway, the next person up is Melanie, and she's going to talk about some acting and accents.
All right, great. Hi, guys. One thing that's important to understand about accents is there is such a variation. I mean, you look at the United States. You have a Boston accent, right? Everyone's heard of Boston. I don't do it because I'm terrible at it. And then you have your Southern accent, which is a lot slower. You got to slow it down. It's kind of like a song, It's a lot more fun to do because it's so much easier. The same can be attributed to English accents, right? All right, so best way I can describe it. Have you guys seen My Fair Lady? Pygmalion. If you want to understand what I'm talking about, the best thing to do is to watch that movie. All right, that accent is called a Cockney accent. What that basically means, it's their working class. It's kind of how I would describe like a ghetto accent is the best way I would describe it, And then you have your James Bond accent. I think we've all seen James Bond. Skyfall, it's got a very British accent. It's a very bit of a snob accent. It's a bit different. And you got your Cockney accent. It's a lot harder to do. But the best way I can describe it, I've got 6 tips for you guys. All right. First thing, it's not just how you pronounce words. When you learn a particular dialect, okay, it's got a musicality to it. It's like a song. It has an ebb and a flow. All right. There's rhythm and there's a cadence, and it's just like the Southern accent. You notice with the Southern accent, it's slower. It's more peaceful, and you can understand them a lot better because of the way it's smoother. Whenever you have your New York accent, it's a lot more rushed, okay? Things are in a hurry. It's kind of like you would picture New York themselves. Everything's hurried and everything's just so quick and fast-paced. Well, down south, it's a lot slower and a lot easier to understand. But tempo, keep a good tempo with that. Also, another thing about accents is understand the slang. Whenever you're doing a play or anytime you don't understand something, research it. That's very important about an accent. Know your accents, know the region where they came from. There's so many variations of an English accent, okay, just in the regions alone. And it's not just about, we say accent, really what it is a dialect. And that pertains to the culture, and it pertains to the people, and it pertains to their slang words. I mean, even if you've noticed, even between different cities within Pennsylvania, we have different slang words for different things. You know what I mean? That's important because if you don't understand, if you don't understand that region of dialect, it's going to be harder to develop a character. And that's most important for believability on stage. And listen to strong dialects. A lot of times, if someone's teaching you how to do an accent, they're going to show you, not always, but most of the time, they're going to show you something that's more subtle, okay? And that usually means that that person has spent a lot of time in other places and it's affecting their accent. How do I explain this? You need to hear, I guess I could say, just a harder version of an accent to the point where you almost don't understand what they're saying. If you've got a bit of an Irish accent going on, you can't understand what they're saying. It's a lot more difficult to understand. But if they talk faster, notice I speed it up, it's a lot faster. It's hard to understand. You can't know quite what they're saying. But you'll learn it, and you need to listen to it a lot. Watch a movie, find a movie that when they're doing those accents. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. is find a movie with an accent that you like. You have to enjoy it. If you don't like, I don't like the Boston accent. I don't even touch that because I don't like it. I know I'm not going to be good at it. If you don't like what you're doing, it's going to be harder to develop it. Okay. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes your character calls for a particular accent. The best thing you can do for yourself is just listen to it over. It's like your favorite song, you know. Sometimes you might not like the song when you first hear it, but the more you listen to it, it kind of grows on you. And you notice that you'll be sitting in the car and you'll sing a couple of the lyrics, and then you get mad at yourself, you slap yourself, and you're like, oh, you know, you get into it, you enjoy it. That's kind of like you can attribute that to an accent. Listen to it. Listen to what they're doing. Listen to how the speed of which they talk. Listen to certain words. A little trick, actually. I was watching, I believe it was NCIS, and the guy did a perfect American accent. But whenever he said Melissa and I, one thing that they do that they cannot seem to get away from is if there's two ahs, like Melissa and I, you have those pauses. It doesn't have a very good flow. Like if you said, Melissa and I went to the store for the, you know, you want to say Melissa and I. It's a nice, smooth flow. That's a little trick you can learn. I mean, you can figure out right away whenever someone's doing, you know, an American accent and they're English. They'll put an R at the end of A's. Melissa and I, you know, it's the best example I can give. But listen to those strong dialects and get as close to your character as possible. It's all about the character. It's not about the accent. Look on an English map, okay, and look to where your character hails. And for instance, Liverpool, they speak what's called a Scouse accent. Liverpool is totally different than if I said Liverpool. Completely different change in dialect. That is called a Scouse accent, okay? And then you have the Cockney accent, which is the working class. These are the guys, like I said, this is like the ghetto accent. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. A sentence I could give you. You've had it poor and you don't know it? Yeah. Okay. Half the time you don't know what they're saying. All right. It's hard. It's a hard one to develop. He laughs at me because it's a tricky one. If you're really going to attack that one, I mean, everybody can do the posh accent. It's very easy to do. You just got to not pronounce your R's. You got to pronounce everything with very particular, you know, sounds. And with the Cockney accent, like I said, I would save that for a rainy day because that's a tough one. I mean, think about your character's class. Think about their age. I mean, where they came from, their upbringing. That's going to have everything to do with your character development on stage. You're not going to have a man come on stage who is, he looks like he's poor and he hasn't got any taste, all right? And he's had a bad job and he's had a bad life and he's come from a very difficult background. But he talks like he's one of the richest men in the country. It's not going to fit your character, you know? But if you've got a character that comes out on stage and he's all goofy and he's got kind of a different flow to him, completely different, you can just kind of feel that. I mean, there's such a difference in that. And work on your voice. You need to make sure your voice is very free and it's very strong. And you can attribute that to life as well. It's hard to communicate people, especially in sales. You know, I've done sales in the past and I don't particularly like it, but it's good if you want to practice, you know, with your acting because you have to be strong and you have to be, you know, they have to hear you. You have to be able to bring yourself across to them. Work on your voice, and don't get overconfident. One thing that you see a lot of times in movies is even if you're not good at accents, you can usually pick out when someone's doing a bad accent, right? You can tell whenever someone's overacting, and just as much as you can tell whenever someone has a really crappy accent. Like if I try to do a Boston accent, you could pick it out right away that it wasn't a real Boston accent, you know? But if I want to do an Irish accent, it's a little bit easier for me because it's something I'm familiar with, and I'm more confident with it to know that I can do it a little bit easier than I could do, you know, a Boston accent, you know? So take what you're good at, take what you enjoy, you know, develop that. And I picked out a couple movies that if you really wanted to delve into that. Underworld's a good movie. I don't know if you guys have watched, you know, the whole vampire thing's big right now. That's really good for your, you know, your James Bond kind of accent, or James Bond, you know. You know, if you watch the BBC News, if you watch any of that stuff, that's a really good example of what a posh accent would be. They've got to be more clear. That's why they pick those people, because they're so clear and they're so understandable that, I mean, you can watch them and you don't get confused by what they're saying. Cockney accent, I don't understand 3 of the 4 words they say. You know what I mean? Also, Doctor Who, there is a region where they use, you guys watch Doctor Who? Yes. Yeah. On the first season of Doctor Who, Rose Tyler, she had what was called a Cardiff accent. Okay, it's kind of, it's like all the accents are a little bit of a mix of everything, just like if you know anything about Australia. That's a lot harder to do. It's an Australian accent. I wouldn't recommend it because it's a lot more difficult. The reason being is it used to be a penal colony. All right, they brought everyone from everywhere, and they saddled them up in Australia, and it was because it's surrounded by water. You know, there was no escaping that. It was certain death. All right, so that's why they have such a weird accent. It's a variation of Scottish, English, Irish. It's a bit of everything. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like, you know, Rose Tyler. She has that kind of weird accent. It's different than the doctors. And most importantly, for the most part, people don't talk with a posh accent. You know, it's I would say kind of tacky. You know, anybody can do it if you want to just be quick and be funny. But tackle something like the Cockney accent if you really want to get into it. And Liverpool accent's a lot harder to do too, but kind of sounds a bit Scottish or something, I would say. Just remember that. Just like I said with the character, find where your character is from. Okay, the region, you know, whether it's Dublin, what their character background is, what kind of character they are, and attribute it to that character to develop them. That's the most important thing you can do because people will see right through that. You know what I mean? It's very important to develop your character when it comes to accents, and just it's probably the best thing I could have to say.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Thank you.
So, all right.
Next, we'll be hearing from Beecher Klingensmith, and he'll be talking about the importance of rehearsing correctly. There's this saying I like to occasionally bring up that practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. And that kind of applies. And we're talking a little bit about prompting and also about memorizing lines.
Okay, I got interested in acting about 10 years ago at the Reitz Theater. I had done a little bit in high school, but it wasn't very significant. And slowly I have learned a lot about how to learn lines. And many people who have never acted or have just seen a play, they say, oh, I could never do that, I could never memorize all those lines. Well, it takes work, and again, practice. In fact, there's an old joke about somebody in New York City looking for Carnegie Hall, and how do I get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. And that's how it is in acting. And it's not just learning the lines, it's fitting them all together because you have to know the cues that the other actors are going to say. So basically, you have to memorize parts of the script where you're going to be speaking to know exactly what the other actor is going to be saying that's your cue. And also never to forget something that is a cue for the other actor because they're going to be lost. If you don't ask a certain question that's part of the script, how are they going to answer it and give that information? There are fakey ways that actors can figure out to do that, but it's obvious when they're doing that. People will sometimes say to me, well, if you forget a line, just make something up. Oh, no, that would not work. I mean, if you were doing improv, that might work, but improv and acting on stage are totally different. What else can I tell you? One of my favorite things in learning character and learning the lines is doing a character analysis. Some directors will have you do this and have every actor in the play read the script and then decide what their character is like before this play happened and where they're heading in their life and sort of like become that person. When Melanie was talking about accents, I was once in a play, it was a wonderful play, in which all the characters had to have Irish accents. But I read in the script, my character had been away from Ireland and living in Africa for 25 years or something, and it said in the notes, he has lost his accent. So I figured any kind of accent that I used would work. But the other actresses and actors in it did a really fine job of coming up with Irish accents. And they got CDs to practice from that were giving an Irish accent. So there are techniques that you can get to learn. Now, in acting or in theater, we do have prompters for rehearsals. Now, I've read in some situations prompters are used in some professional theater to help actors out, but it's not done at the Reitz Theater. When you go on stage, it's sort of like being on a tightrope. you know those lines, or you're going to fall flat on your face. And
No net.
yeah, no net. But it's a lot of fun. So if you ever think, oh, I couldn't do that because I couldn't learn those lines, yes, you can. But it's practice, practice, practice with the other actors, or with a friend or some family member who will supply the cues and you go over them. I found a technique that works for me is to go on the stage, even when the other actors aren't there, and go around reciting my lines on the stage. Actors have to do a lot of blocking. You have to know exactly where you're going to be and who you're going to be facing and so forth on stage. So if you practice your lines on the stage, that sometimes works. Because you know, if I'm standing here looking out in this direction, these are the lines I'm going to be saying. And I know everyone here has acted, even Brian, and everybody has their own techniques for learning lines. Some people just write them again and again. That doesn't help me because I'm going to have to say the lines, not write them. But it's a lot of fun, and if you've never tried acting, try it. And I'm now learning that film acting is very different because they're setting up camera angles just like you have been here, and you have time to look at the lines and just say 3 or 4 lines at a time, because that's all that's going to be filmed in that moment. So you don't have to know the whole script. But on stage, particularly if you have a major role, there are a lot of lines to learn. And I recommend that you try it sometime.
Something you've mentioned to me before, when you first read a script, what you do when you first read a script. You talked about how you read it out loud.
Oh yes, when I first look at a script to decide whether I want to be in a play or have anything to do with it, I'll read the whole thing out loud, and I can kind of tell, oh, the way that character's talking kind of fits me, and I could do it. Now some actors could take any role in a script, but I'm realistic. I know these are certain roles that I could do. And there are certain rules that, no, it would be silly if I tried to do it.
So if people hear you doing that, then they just assume you're crazy, which means you're probably involved in theater, so it kind of works out pretty good. Okay, thanks, Beatrice. And next person I'd like to hear from is one of my personal favorites. A quick little background one of the first shows I went to was actually the first show that Beach was involved in, 12 Angry Men. And I'm not fooled easily, but I was an audience member just watching the show. And I remember, oh, there's Annette, okay. And I thought to myself, I remember the person I was with, I turned to and said, well, she's really nervous. Like, why is she so nervous? Well, as the story went on, her character was supposed to be nervous. And she did such a good job of it that I thought she was nervous herself. But anyway, this is one of the things that's very memorable to me. Annette Cross.
Hi, my name's Annette. My first subject I'm going to step on is subtle nuances. And the description of that is a subtle or slight degree of difference, as in meaning, feelings, tone, facial expressions, or body language. Be aware of every subtlety and nuance in this script. Determine whether or not your emphasis is balanced or if your pauses are properly dramatic or subtle, whichever is appropriate. You need to be able to hear the subtlety, nuance, pauses, inflections, and intuition of every line. I have a quote by Jodie Foster. It's acting subtleties. Acting is all about communicating vulnerability, allowing the truth inside yourself to shine through, regardless of whether it looks foolish or shameful. To open and give yourself completely. It is an act of freedom, love, and connection. Actors long to be known in the deepest way for their subtleties of character, for their imperfections, their complexities, their instincts, their willingness to fall. The more fearless you are, the more truthful the performance. An example I have of a subtle nuance is an excellent actor, Daniel Day-Lewis, as Lincoln. I don't know if anyone has seen that movie recent. He let the monumental nature of the man speak for itself. He is tall, a little stooped. He is calm, patient, and shrewd, with a subtle warmth and wit. That kind of describes his acting as very excellent in subtle nuances. Okay, my next is idiosyncrasies. a behavioral attribute that is distinctive and peculiar to an individual mannerism, the physical or mental constitution peculiar to an individual. You must select a quirk that is appropriate in either geographical sense or character history. Sometimes the script will outline the physical or mental quirks of your characters. However, creating your own quirks gives a performance an authentic and believable edge. I think I have an excellent example of how a script does spell out the quirks of characters. I have the script as nonsense, and the main characters are 5 nuns. And the description of each character, Sister Mary Regina was to the outside world a model mother superior, even if she was overweight. But to those who knew her, she was an outrageous, quick-witted soul who knew how to get a laugh. She tried to convince you that she was strict, but everyone knew that her bark was worse than her bite. Sister Mary Hubert was a kind person who would always try to be understanding and diplomatic. She taught the novices the ground rules and was supposed to be dignified, but with the slightest bit of encouragement, she was ready to kick up her heels. Sister Robert Ann was a tough, streetwise nun who had a heart of gold. All the kids adored her because she spoke their language, and she could hit a baseball out of the park. And Sister Mary Amnesia was the picture of innocence. She couldn't remember her past, and so looked at each new day with a childlike joy. And Sister Mary Leo had been a professional dancer before she entered the convent and was always eager to display her talent. She was very impressionable because she was young and could easily be led astray. That's pretty vivid quirks in each of those characters for that. Okay, my last subject then is emoting. It means to express emotion, especially in an expressive or theatrical manner. Be completely familiar with your lines and blocking in every scene. The only way you are ever going to connect with your character and do emotions convincingly when acting is by having a firm grasp of your lines and a technical part of your craft. Study those around you in emotional situations. By studying the facial expressions of either actors and the people in your daily life, you can learn the natural progression and expression of emotions. The way I personally approach acting and developing my characters is to put myself back, make it not about me, not my ego, and that helps put aside being self-conscious and opens me to be honest with feelings, tone, expression of my characters, and relay that to my fellow actors and especially the audience. Storytelling for me, whether film or stage, is to draw the audience in to make them feel the emotions of the story and to move them in an unforgettable way.
All right, thank you. Thanks a lot for that. Next person I'd like to introduce probably has more hours put into the Reitz Theater than the rest of this table combined. That's very, very possible. Directed multiple shows, acted in shows, and basically for many shows have been there to sometimes come in and correct other people's mistakes and set construction, and sometimes build sets himself. And basically he's done just about everything possible in the theater. His name is Brian Schaefer.
Hello. I am what you call a techie. A techie is basically anything that does not have to do with these folks, the actors. Actors get all the credit, but when it comes down to it, the techies are the one that do the work and create the stage and do the planning. And when the curtain comes up, there is an individual with that light switch who decides whether or not this show starts. It's the techie. For those watching, maybe through media, there are 5 people sitting here, but the truth is there are almost 20 people in the background, and there's equipment everywhere, and it's kind of overwhelming. But the fact is, somebody had to set up every part of this. And that's what most of you do, is work with equipment and computers and digital and Chrome, yes? When I started doing theater in the early 90s, I used cassette tapes and reel-to-reel and spliced sound effects together with tape. And our lights were done with plugs and switches. We threw switches, switched plugs, and that's how we did it. I'm actually a little bit overwhelmed by the equipment you have. I don't know what most of this is. Technology has changed that fast in the last 15 years. that even in our theater, we're outdated. We're constantly upgrading our sound system, our light system, and we're always looking for people who knew how to put it together and how to use the new equipment. I am actually behind in technology, and most of the equipment that you're learning to use right now, I couldn't plug in. So the techies are extremely important in any production. We're behind a green screen, you can put anything you want up there. In theater, it all goes out live. There's no takes, there's no cuts, there's no editing, so everything needs to be prepared and practiced. And when the curtain goes up, everybody needs to be on the same page, including tech. And no matter what accent or no matter what character we have on stage, they need to be lit. There needs to be a stage behind them, and somebody had to put it together.
One of my favorite parts of putting the show together is when we get to the lighting.
Yes.
And that sets the whole story, you know, the soft light, the down light, whatever it is. Just really gets you into your character and you feel it all coming together. I love that part of it.
And even here, I see there are several types of lighting and angles of lighting. Otherwise, you know, we'd be in shadows. Half of us would be dark, half of us would be light. And some of you may have set that up. And it's my favorite part of theater. When I direct a play, the very first thing I do is design my lights. Before I pick my characters, my actors, I design my lighting. I want to know how it's going to be lit and what moods are going to be set by the lighting I use. And there's a lot of trickery, and we call it smoke and mirrors. Basically, I always felt you can put anyone on stage, but it's the smoke and mirrors that sell the play. They will disagree with me, but I've shined lights on every one of these. I've gone to great lengths for Beecher, for a few productions, for, as Dave says, one scene. But that one scene is so important that we would spend hours and hours working on the tech, working on the stage and the lighting for that one scene for a few seconds of an entire production. But it's worth it.
Beecher was basically the devil. He was the antagonist of Edgar Allan Poe at the time.
Yes, and I had to sell it. And, you know, this is my first time in front of a green screen. I can't wait to be on the other side and see how we look. But from here, it's actually rather intimidating. I can tell you in professional theater, in amateur theater, in film, in movies, even the TAJ news crew, they don't go anywhere without their techies. Somebody's holding that camera, somebody's holding a light, and someone had a game plan to get the news report going. And that's probably where most of you are going to come in. No matter where you go, there are lights, there are microphones, there are cameras. Somebody needs to know how to set them up. You can apply for a job at your local restaurant. Well, let's choose McDonald's, for example. Well, guess what? Have you noticed everyone at McDonald's is talking on a microphone? Somebody needed to know how to set that up. It may not be film, it may not be theater, but it's still tech. So there will always be a need for students like you, of students of tech and film and lighting. You will always have a job. No matter where you go, there's always somebody asking, how do I set up this camera? How do I, grandma gets a new VCR, doesn't know how to program it. Well, I was the techie, I knew how to do it. When I was your age, we called ourselves AV, audiovisual kids. We actually got to set up reel-to-reel films and get out of class to do it. I was one of the kids who knew how to do it, so it got me out of a lot of classes. That was my angle, but now it's the artistic angle and making sure these folks are in their light, if we can get them to stand in their light.
And they're asking, what is a VCR?
Yeah, that's
how fast things are changing.
A VCR, yeah, the equipment has changed, but the concept is the same. If they can't hear the actors, whose fault is it? It's the tech's fault. If they can't see the actors, whose fault? It's the tech's fault. So tech is always on the job, always monitoring, always changing, always adjusting. I've noticed while we're sitting here, the movement in the background and the work it's taken to perfect the sound and the video, and it'll only get bigger and bigger as technology improves. I see the monitors here are quite impressive. When we started doing theater in the 90s, we used sign language between our tech booth and backstage to communicate. It's time to go on. We would point. We'd have flashlights, and we would use signals and send notes and send runners. And nowadays, it's pretty much monitors, microphones, and it makes life a lot, I'd say, more convenient, but the job is still the same. You still have to be there, and you still have to do it correctly, or someone's not going to look good. Yep. Focus. Someone's always in the background. Look at the camera. Get into your light. Yep. And waving off stage. But it never changes. And we do have a lot of fun backstage. Opening night, we're the only people who get to sit back and relax. Are the tech guys. The rest of you are working hard and sweating and scared.
But in the end, it's like magic that it works.
It
And
all-
the actors do their part and the lighting.
It all comes together. It all comes together. But without one, you cannot have the other. But to me, one of the most important parts of any of this are the individuals like you who are running the equipment, who set it up, who are new enough to bring the proper equipment, the right chords, running your lines in parallels. I'm sure they've taught you all of that, and making sure your sound checks are right, your light checks are correct, and it never ends. You're just using more technologically advanced equipment than we did back in the Stone Age. However, your job is exactly the same as mine was back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I would encourage anyone to learn as much as you can about sound and lighting. And I can assure you, no matter where you go for a job, in life there's somebody running the lights, there's somebody setting speakers, there's somebody, like I said, even in McDonald's, someone has a sound system. That communication system is important. And it'll be up to folks like you to learn how to use it.
I mean, you got to work as a cohesive unit between all of us to pull it off. Just like in the real world, when you work, if you don't get along with the other staff, you don't get along with your customers, I mean, it doesn't work out. You just gotta work good together. It's just gonna be ugly.
Yep.
So.
And another thing to touch on what Brian was saying, knowing at least a general idea of how lighting works, so sound and the backstage, working backstage, that makes you a better director. Knowing what the actors need, knowing everything, that makes you a better actor. If you do the multiple different jobs in the production, that helps with the other jobs in the production. Another thing on what Brian was talking about is margin of error. Having done both tech and acting myself, nowhere near to the extent that Brian has, but I know when you're acting, you can make some mistakes. You can cover your mistakes. When you do light, you can make a little bit of mistakes if you cover them well, if you cover them carefully. And when you do sound, you pretty much can't make any mistakes. So the margin of error gets a lot less. It's a lot less for the tech than it is for the people actually on stage.
Absolutely, absolutely. If one of your cameras goes off, there's someone in the dark. And that's always the case. Mm-hmm. The tech folks are working from beginning to end. They're always the first on scene, the last to leave the scene, and they get the least credit. But they do most of the work.
We do applaud you at the end.
Yes. By tech, I mean, it's not just lights and sound. By tech in theater, we're including makeup, costumes, set building, painting, even directing is part tech. And so there was a whole group of jobs in the theater biz, and acting is one of them. For every actor, they say there's at least a dozen people backstage working that made that possible. And a lot of times it's true.
Yep.
And hopefully that will be some of you. Carrying from maybe this type of videography to live theater. Who knows, maybe you'll be on Broadway someday, backstage, and the lights are down, that's you. You're the one who did it. That's what we like to see.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, thanks a lot. I guess we're going to open this up to some questions, and if you don't have questions for us, we'll come after you with questions, so I recommend you ask a few.
Come up with questions.
Shoot. Am I going to have to go out there and start raising hands?
Hannah, ask a
Why
question.
don't you guys tell us what you do? Here, what do you do? What of this impacted you the most? The technical aspect, the writing aspect. What pertains to you as a?
Well, I've done a couple school plays before, so I kind of have experience with theater.
Well, that's good.
So basically everything, but I'm a writer. Like I write all the time. Mm-hmm. And I really like England, so British accents, you know. So it's basically everything. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Well, as a writer, you may become a director, and in order to see your work portrayed on stage the way you like, you may be the person doing the text, setting the lights, designing the stage or the costume. There's a whole world of work to do other than reciting lines to enable that person to look good and to do their job.
Yep.
We need techies, and you can be both.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There are times in theater we find ourselves wearing many hats. As director, stage designer, stage builder, light designer, costume, sound. I've been in positions where I've had to do all of that.
Props are always an issue.
Props, that's also part of tech.
Where's my hat?
Program design, sound design.
Somebody has to coordinate that. There's a stage manager for every production whose job is to basically organize everyone and to make it happen.
So if you're organized, that's right up your alley. I'm definitely not.
Well, similar to your studio here, organization is everything. If you weren't organized before we stepped in here, it'd be mayhem, it'd be noisy, people running, trying to do things at last minute.
Yep.
Organization, preparation. It's the same stage or cinema or studio. It's all about preparing and being organized.
Yep. Preparation.
Absolutely. Know your equipment inside and out and how to use it, and it'll be your friend. It will help you.
Keep in mind deadlines and time management at all times. That can kill you. If you let things go and then all of a sudden it becomes very stressful and very chaotic at the end. Particularly with plays, there's a hard deadline. That we're starting at 8 o'clock on Friday, period. That's not going to change. Mm-hmm. So you got to have it done. We've had some really creative directors that have really pushed the time to the very last second. I've done it myself on some aspects and some shows, and then other directors are very punctual with it. It varies, but it's better to have the rush and the heavy workload early on and be able to relax when you come in your show time for anything, if you can.
So my personal preference is just to be overly ready.
Yes.
I like to be ready early. I like to practice my lighting and sounding many times before opening night.
Yeah, that stress will show in whatever you do.
And I always have an emergency kit ready for things to go wrong. I wait for things to go wrong, and I'm ready to tackle them. In live theater, you don't get to edit.
Nope.
You don't get to take two. It is what it is. So the practice ahead of time makes a world of difference.
I think if I may too, because we've got to get wrapping it up here, the morning session, they're going to get going. But I'd like for you guys very briefly to address so many of the things that you're saying. I'm sitting here going, there's a real world application to this. Preparation, organization. Does this ring a bell, guys? These are the things that we preach in CHOP all the time. Communication, teamwork. Real briefly, can you guys go around the table and tell the kids why those skills are so important in the real world, and maybe a story. How has your experience in theater helped you in the real world?
I think Melanie will start.
I will start. Well, I'll tell you. I work in sales. I worked for AT&T, and a lot of that is acting. You might not want to be there. You might not want to be what you're. You might not believe in what you're selling. It makes it hard. As an actor, I can pull that, and I can say, you know what? I can kind of I can change my demeanor. I can change what's going on. I can change the circumstances a little bit so that I am believable and so that the customers can trust me and can rely on me. You have to have that presence. Like when you're on stage, if you're not believable, no one's going to buy it. Just like in the real world, if you're trying to sell something to somebody, bad as that sounds, if you want to sell something, you have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe in your product, and you have to believe in your character. You know what I mean? And that has to come across, or they're not going to buy it. They're going to walk away. They're going to walk right out the door, and they're not going to trust you.
Great.
Peter?
I was a teacher for many years before I retired, and one of the things I brought to the theater with me before I even got involved is the voice that I can project. And I think you all have to project your own personality and your voice and say what you mean and say it clearly, and so that everybody can hear you. And I think that's very important. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm shy, I couldn't do that. No, just forget that. You can change the level of your voice and be project.
And Annette, would you?
Yeah, for me, I have a personal experience years ago now, but I taken responsibility and commitment when you do commit yourself to a team effort of a play. And the old adage, the show must go on, pertained to my situation. And the Sunday night before opening night of Friday of a play that I was doing, my daughter passed away in a car accident. No way could I have ever thought of being able to do the show. People were scrambling, trying to get, words so they can try to cover it. And it was like 3 separate plays, a Neil Simon play, so it was like on stage the whole time for my character. It was just a pretty good size character. So however I did it, I still don't know, but the Thursday for dress rehearsal, I said, if you're going to do this, the seed was planted by the director, and I said, oh, I don't know. But I said, if we're going to do this, go up and get yourself put together. Got my makeup on, I put my costume on, and stumbled a bit during the rehearsal, but they said my acting was even deeper. But I was able to do the whole entire 6 shows during that period of time and get through it. To me, commitment, it's real serious because there's no backup for you. And things happen. That was an unusual situation there. But once you commit, you need to give your all to the project.
I'd like to add one final thing to take care of your equipment. Your equipment is your life. It's like your car in your home. You own it, you use it, it makes you take care of it. And if you take care of equipment, it will take care of you. Learn it inside and out and love it and use it. But always respect your equipment. Because when it fails, boy, it's tough. So you need to make sure it doesn't fail.
Or when it's not there when you need it.
Yes.
Where it is.
Someone's put it in the wrong spot.
Where is it?
Yeah, your equipment will make you.
Absolutely.
So-
Very, very good. Any questions, guys? We got to go ahead and wrap this up.
What was the most challenging play you've done?
That might vary. Go ahead, Brian.
The most challenging play I've done is Romeo and Juliet. It was a technical play. Everyone, Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare provided only words. It was up to the tech and the director to provide the scene. And it took months. It took months.
That was my first play, and it turned out well.
Yeah,
But he did a
it
good
was.
job.
It was beautiful.
Go ahead.
Nevermore, because I had to sing, and I can't sing to save my life. It was terrible. He throws this on me at the last second. You're going to be doing this chorus thing at the end, and I could have hit him. But I did it. I had
It worked
to.
out well, though.
Yeah.
I have had lights go out in the middle of the play. And during intermission, had got a ladder, climbed up and changed it, and a time limit just so the play could go on. Receiving applause, of course, but things happen. Your
That's worth
equipment,
it.
we didn't take good enough care of equipment. Instrument failed on us, and we paid. So, lesson learned. Hopefully, it'll never happen to me again.
Satan.
Every play that I've been in, I love playing Satan, but so it's out of character for me. But I enjoyed it. But I think maybe the play that was most challenging and most memorable was Wizard of Oz, because it was a big production. I had to sing, and I'm not a singer either. And they said, "Oh, it's just a couple little phrases." No, it was a whole song. But it was a lot of fun, and the other actors were just amazing. And that was a play where they were painting the set moments before the first performance and trying to come up with special effects that weren't always working. But it ended up being a very memorable experience. And
Okay, there's the bell, guys. We need to wrap it up. Let's give a hand to our folks here. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
guys.
real quick, before you guys run out of here, I want to grab a picture. Okay, let's get you.
What a pleasant bell.
All right,
Out
guys,
there, it's not.
let me get
That was just a
shot.
bell.
Let's have you up on the stage. get everybody up on the stage.
Oh, okay.
I guess we should probably stand.
We're not used to sitting so long. Usually we're
It's a
running
long
about.
time to sit.
Get everybody up on here.
So
Hurry
what-
up, Tim.
All right, look here, guys. And it looks good. Big smile. Tim. Tim, you help out. Come on.
Come on, Tim.
Come on, Tim.
Jump up there. They don't care.
Just jump.
Come on, Tim. I don't bite hard.
All right.
Who said that?
Everybody look here.
Turn around.
All right, big smiles. Let me get another one. Awesome. Look. Brian, lean back just a little bit. You're blocking each other. There you go. All right, excellent. One more.
He's like my mom.
Okay, got it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Wonder if those are just put up.
I sat so long.
No.
Tomorrow, we're prep for our show on Friday, right? Leave everything.
What'd you think?
Leave everything.
I was gonna take your sticker off.
No, I took it off.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay.
Oh, it's upside down now.
Well,
That's me.
they ask, I got it on.
That would be me.
Dropped a piece of candy.
Oh, it's a cough drop.
Well, we didn't actually come in with an audio meter.
No, it's good. Huh?
So it's mostly aesthetic.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't stay here for the afternoon.
Came in here beforehand. It was like a giant tin can. So we put them up and they deadened the room nicely, and for our purposes, it's great. So,
I just got noticed.
Come on through, guys.
That was good because I was brief.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it.
I can't be here this afternoon.
Yeah, that's
but I
fine.
really enjoyed it.
That's fine. We appreciate it.
I'll prepare a little.
Dave, reach around there and hit that camera right there, that red button.
On this one?
Yeah, right there. Big red button. Just hit it.
Where's that?
Right here. I got it.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
I couldn't see it from there.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
In my 16-channel leprechaun.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, my
that's
goodness.
crazy. And the live feed looked great. See here. Stop capturing.